be first, hit without being hit. For me, that's a great rule for the street as well. If you want to say who's tough, you can't afford to take one to give one. That might just be your last one.
Honestly, between these three eras, it looks like a different sport in a lot of ways.
In the 80s, 90s, we were just focused on skill mastery.
They introduced the flag system, but then it was only 3 judges at a time.
I think it's also sometimes a little bit important to know that in Kumite, we get 10 world champions every 2 years, male and female. In kata, they get 2.
Now they're only standing 2 meters apart.
I actually do remember when they changed that.
You're that old.
I'm not that old. This podcast is facilitated by the World Karate Federation as part of its mission to promote and inform about karate globally. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily reflect the official position of the WKF. Yes, hello. This is the World Karate Cast, the official podcast of the WKF, brought to you by Kaizen Culture. We are your hosts, Mitchell Dome and Nathan Blockley. And as they say in Hong Kong with Cantonese, Gok Wai Pang Yao Dai Gai Ho. That was definitely, I butchered that one so badly, and I apologize to anyone if I got that so wrong, but that was definitely my hardest one. Make sure you're commenting down below on the WKF YouTube channel where you're watching this episode from, because we're trying to greet everyone in their foreign language. But this one is very special because we have a special guest on today from the Hong Kong national team. The head coach of Hong Kong is Sensei William Thomas. Nathan, this is going to be a very special episode.
It will, and you did well. I think that was definitely your hardest greeting
easily.
So far. Yeah, I think we'll have to get Grace on just to double check that you said that okay, because we were talking with William before we started recording this, and first off, funny guy.
Yeah, very funny.
Very funny guy. But he was saying how the tone matters a lot in Cantonese, and if you get the tone wrong, you can be saying something completely different to what you meant to say.
So yeah, I do apologize if I was saying something completely wrong, but I did try. I just tried to say hello. How are you, my friends? But yeah, we'll move on. Today is a special episode. It's not the deep dive episodes like we usually do, Nathan. It's a topic focused episode, and this is where we bring on a special expert guest to talk about this topic. And what's the topic today? This is one you're super excited about.
I think everybody's super excited for this. Old school versus new school karate. So what karate looked like back in the day, and we're talking 90s, maybe some 2000s as well, but really how it's evolved over the years and comparing these two different eras of karate, really.
Yeah, no, and we've got Sensei William Thomas from England Karate, who's now the coach of Hong Kong, to talk about this because, Willie
better guest?
Yeah, formerly known as William Thomas, but everyone would probably know him as Willie Thomas back in the day, fighting in that golden era of English karate where the men's team dominated the world. I think it was 5 gold medals and countless other world medals in the team event space.
World Championships
Yeah, so that was fantastic competing back then. But he also is now currently a coach for the Hong Kong national team and has done for the past, 12 years?
Was since 2017, so it hasn't quite been 12 years since 2017, but it feels like
it. Feels like a long time.
Yeah.
But I think this is just going to be a really great episode to unpack with Willie. But we grew up watching the early 2010s era, which we're going to go through some of that stuff now. But I think the sport has changed so much.
Yeah, and I'm really keen to dive into this episode. And just side note, just try to imagine a men's team or any team winning at 5 consecutive world championships in the team event. Nowadays, that is just unheard of. That is crazy.
I mean, it's crazy. We've seen the Iranian national men's team. They've won it multiple times. One of the greatest team events of our generation. But the domination from that team was insane, and Willie was a part of that. So.
And for those who don't know as well, I believe England is in the top, well, I know for a fact, England is in the top 5 for all-time WKF medal rankings. So they're not as strong as they used to be. They're still very strong. I mean, we saw Rochelle Walters in multiple gold medal finals this year at Premier League. So there are those athletes that are still pushing the world level. But back then it was medals left, right and centre for England. They were so strong.
Now, but before we bring on Willie, let's have a look back at how karate used to look like in the 90s. And the WKF media team have been pretty generous to share some of our old footage, the throwback from 1992 World Championships, where we actually had 2 world champions from Australia. This is two of
Repeat
our-
that.
We had 2 world champions for Australia in the same tournament, which is very exciting and something that's very close to our heart. We've only had 3 world champions in our history, 4 world champions in our history. And 2 of them at the same event. So
Yes.
it's very exciting. So we're going to watch some of the footage now and then go through and talk a little bit about what we think about the eras leading up until today's karate.
Let's go for it.
It is, look at that, white and red belts.
That is
And just
crazy.
no shin
Yeah.
pads.
Yeah. God, so loud.
Very loud. Oh, yes, so tough. Very
They hardly look like they have gloves on.
I think it's like literally cotton. It's cotton wool. I like that. It's mirror system referees.
Yes, only 2 referees on the tatami.
Oh, it's pretty explosive.
It is. A lot more static, though.
Yeah, very much. But the thing is, our days are still very static nowadays. Oh, but this looks like a lot less movement. Oh, but kind of crazy movement.
That is very crazy.
Very
movement.
brawly. It looks so tough. Like, I don't think I'd want to be fighting in this era here. I love the old scoreboards.
Yes, yeah. The retro look.
And we got Wayne Otto here. One of the greatest of all
Yes,
time.
one of William Thomas's teammates.
Long Chudongak. There's not much kicking going on.
There's not much takedowns either.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
definitely. That is a
textbook.
anticipation
Textbook.
was still a thing though.
Yeah.
And the celebration.
Yeah, I love the celebrations. This is really great. This must have been like the super point, like the Ippon, which was like it would finish it.
Yes, we'll talk about that.
Well,
Yep.
this goes to 2002 World Championships with Ivan Liao, and look at the kicks. I reckon this is when the kicks started coming into effect. Oh, geez.
That is not going to tickle.
Oh, tough. Ivan Liao was definitely one of the greatest for sure. And now we go to another great in Rafael Agaev and Luigi Bussa.
And the 2010 World Championships here.
Yeah. Probably the introduction. Oh my goodness. That is
Wow.
one of the best kick. The clinch work and the kicking
Yep.
is something that's definitely changed now. And the pads, shin pads.
Yes, the colours. And the colours just red and blue.
Yeah. It's quick. It's very like explosivity. And then we go for the following World Championships, a repeat match of these 2 greats. And I think this is the start of where the static play came back into effect.
Yeah.
Not less action, but a lot more like tactical gameplay.
Yeah, a lot more in-out distance control, all
Yep.
of that sort of stuff. Setting your opponent up to get scored on.
I remember watching this fight growing up, and there was nothing going on until the very last
Yep,
sort of
so
little bits. I
tactical.
think this is, and I'd love to get Willie's perspective on this, but when the tactical side of things really came into effect, especially with the clinching.
Yeah, that's what I didn't like from this era, though, this two-handed grabbing, but we'll definitely talk about this after the montage. Yeah, so much grabbing.
Yeah. And this is nothing compared to how it used to be, like in some of the other matches in the heavyweight.
True.
Oh my goodness. That's lightning fast.
That is lightning fast.
I don't think that
Yeah.
scores though, because I remember, if correctly, it was a decision, that
Yeah,
match.
right.
And Luigi got his world championship win. So, look, as different as that looks now compared to now's karate, those 3 eras, very, very different between the 3 of them.
Yeah, honestly, between these like 3 eras, it looks like a different sport in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and we've had like quite a lot of rule changes in that time as well. So I think that's probably what's led to the changes for those eras and up to now. I mean, just alone, we've got the shin pads introductions, the
Yeah.
referees changing, and even in the kata space, it was vastly different. We didn't watch any kata highlights, but the rules side of that was very different.
Yeah, so in WKF level, so the top level of karate, there were compulsory katas.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
and this was in 2009. This is the earliest rule book we could find was 2009. So we'll get Willie's input on how it was different even before that. But in 2009, yeah, there were 2 compulsory katas. So obviously those katas vary depending on what style you were in. But yeah, you go to World Championships, you're locked into doing 2 of like 3 or 4 katas for the first 2 rounds.
So crazy. And obviously katas could not be repeated like how we have now.
Yep.
We've got the reintroduction of, doing a kata that you did before in the medal matches, which I think is great. I think some people will say it's not super fantastic, but you don't agree, do you?
I'm a bit on the other side. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed when kata athletes had to have 7 different katas that were all like at the top level, and there was a lot of tactics involved in when do I use katas against specific athletes or what rounds. I sort of love that side of kata. So
True.
the fact we've gotten rid of that tactically, it means there's a lot less. It's just like your best kata, which
Yeah.
on the flip side, on your side, it means you're seeing the best kata possible in the medal matches and the best kata athletes as well. Like they didn't lose in previous rounds because they did like their, let's say, 4th best kata, but they lost to someone who did their best kata just to beat them.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, very true. There's a lot less room for tactical moves, I guess, for kata. But I guess this is the evolution of the sport. And just like with kumite, we saw on the highlights 2 referees.
What would that be like now?
So much chaos.
Imagine putting all that weight and responsibility on 2 referees. You'd have video reviews at every single point.
Yeah. Oh, and then they introduced the flag system, but then it was only 3 judges at a time, and
Yes.
then the 5 came into it as well. Which
Yeah,
I think
you
was
remember the
fantastic.
3 when it was like there was the referee where they normally are,
Yeah.
and then there was a judge immediately opposite the referee, and then 1 judge each on each side, the
Yeah.
red side and the blue side. That was a crazy time, hey?
So I loved as well. There was some highlights they were just going like
Yeah.
this with the flags
Oh, and
so
this one?
aggressively.
This one as
Yeah,
well?
didn't see anything.
Yeah, for those who don't know and maybe not watching us as well, we're sort of wiping, putting our arms to and fro on the bottom, and that says that there was no point or there was nothing in there. And then they used to hold up the flag so it sort of hid their face, which says that I didn't see that point, so I can't weigh in on this decision. So yeah, it's crazy how much refereeing just itself has changed over the years.
Absolutely. And not only that, but the way that we score points, the Ippon, Nihon, Sanbon in
I
our
remember
days,
that.
which was fantastic. That's just the
Sanbon.
wording. Sanbon, yeah. But also, I think back in the 80s and 90s, it was Wazari and Ippon, which was a half point and a full point. And, you had to have this like super point to get a full point that was only deemed a super point or an actual point by the referee.
Damn,
So-
you're teaching me stuff now.
You didn't know this?
No, I didn't know. We
Well,
had
I have to clear
points.
up on all that from Willie. But
Yes, yeah.
It was like the referee got to decide if that was a fatal blow.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because that's what Ippon means in
Yes.
Japanese. It means I'm finishing the fight. So that's why we obviously have made the move back to Ippon being the 3-point is the idea that is a fatal blow if it was in real life.
There was a big rule change in the early 2010s era, which if you got a warning, if you got a secondary warning like a keikoku, the point would be awarded to the other person. And then it would increase. So your third keikoku or your hand soccer chui
Yep.
was 2 points. And then it just kept getting further and further, which
Yeah.
was crazy.
Imagine that, giving up 2 points to the opponent just because you got a warning for, say, contact
yeah.
or stepping out.
Yeah.
You had the different categories of warnings as well. You had Cat 1 warnings that were all to do with contact, and then you had Category 2 warnings that were to do with, grabbing or stepping out. So that was a time. Even the small differences, like athletes for kumite, they stood 3 meters apart.
Yeah.
Now they're only standing 2 meters apart.
I actually do remember when they changed that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Yeah, you're that old.
I'm not that.
No, kidding. But that is a seemingly small change, but
Yes.
that completely changes the dynamic of actual competing. And all these minor changes do change the dynamic. I mean, two-handed grabbing.
Massive. I have a feeling that that'll be a very big part of our conversation with Willie, but that was a big thing for us to take out the leg takedowns and the two-handed grabbing.
The leg takedowns.
Yeah.
We used to be able to pick
helicopter
up,
ones.
pick up from the legs and pretty much dump the opponent on the ground and score a sunbon at the
Yeah.
time, 3 points.
Very crazy. Well, there's so much that we could go through just with ourselves. I think this is where we need to get the expert opinions.
Okay.
Should we bring on and highlight this fantastic guest that we have on today, Nate?
Yeah, I reckon we do.
All right. So we've got Sensei William Thomas, former athlete of England karate, but now a coach of the Hong Kong national team. We don't actually have a Premier League record because Premier Leagues weren't a thing back when Willie was competing, but world champion in 1992 with the highlights that we were just watching in Granada for Kumite minus 70 kilograms, European champion 1986 in Madrid for the same division, vice world champion, vice European champion a couple of times, a few medals here and there. We can't cover every single medal because there's too many to count, but these are some of the main ones here. World Games silver and bronze. As I said before, just a household name in karate, just full stop, but more so for English karate and what he's done. He's part of the only father-son world championship duo.
That's a crazy statistic. Jordan Thomas in 2016. I watched the final as part of a little bit of research for this episode, and seeing Jordan, William was the coach, obviously, for his son at that World Championships, and seeing them come together after Jordan won the fight 8-0.
Crazy.
8-0 against
domination.
Hungary. Yeah. Seeing that was just heartwarming. And the fact that it's the only time that's ever happened is wild. That's such an accolade to hold.
Very, very special moment there. And speaking of his coaching career, I think he stepped into now being known as William Thomas as the coach, whereas before he was Willie Thomas as the athlete. Coached England for 6 years as the Kumite, in the Kumite division before stepping into his role now as the head coach for Hong Kong. So as you said, he's been doing that since 2017, which feels like a long time, but we've had the pleasure of speaking on tour a couple of times, and I know you've had some chats with him as well. He's just a fantastic person, first of all, and the knowledge behind the man is just, I can't even put to words what it would be like to be inside his brain to see what he's got in there. So I can't wait to hear his perspective on old karate versus new karate.
The perfect guest. Let's bring him on. Alrighty, Willie, was that an alright introduction?
Oh, too much. I am humbled. When you read it out like that, it sounds like I've been busy, right?
You have been busy. I mean, you've done everything in karate as an athlete and now as
And
a coach. No, you said that, not us, not us. Thanks for taking the time to come onto the podcast with us today, really, and it is just an absolute honour for us to get you on here to talk about this amazing topic.
My pleasure.
I think first thing we want to start off with is that we know you quite personally, like we see each other at tournaments and whatnot. We've seen you in this space for ages and we're big fans of karate. But for the listeners who don't know much about you, Willie, why are you an expert guest when it comes to talking about what karate used to be like in the old school era of karate and now what it's turned into the new school era?
Yeah, I mean, the term expert, seems to sort of suggest that I know everything. But I would say that I've just literally been around long enough to be able to share my experiences like firsthand. So what I'm going to be imparting with you guys today is literally firsthand experiences, or my experiences from my eyes and how I saw it. So I apologise if there's anybody out there that is around at the same time that you have a totally different experience, but I can only explain from what I see from my eyes and my experiences.
Wow, forever the humble man. That is just so amazing to hear. I can't wait to get your perspective. Let's just talk about what it was like for yourself, first of all, with these first-hand experiences as a competitor for England and going through, like what we said before, is that golden era of English karate.
Yeah, I've heard that before. A lot of people will say, "Oh, yeah, the golden era, and this was the time." And yeah, we were very successful in that period. I look back and actually remember it as very stressful. it's a it's a high stress environment, and fraught with challenges. Challenges every single time. You've got a target on your back every time you go to a competition, and that men's team steps out, and you walk into the warm up area. Now, the warm up area for men's team, if there is 40 teams times 7 people, that's a lot of testosterone in that room. Yeah, and they are all, every single one of them, want to take you down. So it's a test of attrition. It's the self belief. It's all those little anecdotes that you see thrown about in that moment, in that warm up area, which is absolutely charged. And it's fearful. And everybody in that room is fearful, whether you are a high regarded team or whether you're a young team or the first time or not so strong, it is fearful. And I use the word fearful, and we have the word, courage. And actually, all courage is just fear, but you just manage to hold on for a little bit longer. You're not at the stage where you are, you're imploding. So you can just hold on to that fear and not implode for longer than most. And that era was a pleasure for me to walk into. I walked on the shoulders of Jeff Thompson, Vic Charles, Pat Mackay. These were all individual world champions. They were already 3 times world team champions. And I can remember I fought in the world team, and actually I didn't want to go in that team because it was the 5th time um, we was going for the 5 in a row, and I was suggested to go in as a sub, and I thought, I ain't sure about this one.
That's a lot of pressure, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I
Um,
think you guys must have
yeah,
had the keys to success though, and I think when you talk about how fearful that warm up area was, I think that's very understandable. Seeming the gloves were like half a centimeter thick. I think you had to enter into those fights with that sort of grit and determination and fearlessness that it sort of come from your fear. So can you paint us a picture of what it was like growing up in karate in the UK in the
in that
80s and
time.
90s, and yeah, what it was like just from you for your personal story, what your introduction to karate was
Yeah.
and how it was growing up in
Yeah.
the sport.
The dynamic of karate was very different in those days. So, men's senior category was 16 and third Q and above. So the second you hit 16, you're men's senior.
Yeah,
And we only
right.
had these pads on, and I in those days I'm kind of 65, 70 kilos, as was Wayne Otto and some of the other people that came through in the team. And we talk about the evolution of movement, why people are moving today. So in those early to mid 80s, we're fighting people from the 70s when it was boom, it was just really static and just charge and knock your teeth out. Uh, and we're kind of men senior at 16 and brown belt. So what happened was you have to move, right? I'm not gonna stand still at 65, 70 kilos against a man, 25, 28 in their peak, with the intention to kill you. So we start moving. So the movement side of things, for us in that period, was born out of survival. You stand still, you get hit. So we used to move a lot, and it was a little bit chaotic and a bit disjointed, but it did the job. And then as we kind of progressed, we kind of adopted it into, there's a strategy. So we started using movement as a strategy and formalizing it and training it. And this was, from my opinion, the early birth of movement. You know, it didn't come out of, oh, you know, this is going to make a really good highlight clip. I'm going to do this little slip. You know, it kind of come from a survival place of survival, and we used maybe the some boxing footwork, you know, because they were moving at that time. So it came out of survival, and then it evolved through copying people like Pat Mackay, Scotland. He was a fantastic mover. He came from a sprinting and a boxing background, so he was all over the place. It was like, wow, you know, we want to move like Pat Mackay, we want to move like Vic Charles, Jeff Thompson. So then we started copying these guys and formalizing the first decade of when everybody started to move. And you know, we look back now, but we're looking back like over 30 years, so it's not going to look the same as it is now. But this was the beginnings of movement, and we were at the front of that when we used to go overseas. So now we go overseas, we go to the Europeans World Championships. You know, we're moving. Everybody else is like this, and we're like, you know, we're all over the place. And if you don't train it, this is one of the reasons for the success. So Tiki Donovan, you know, was the mastermind of the team in those days. Although a lot of the players were independent, it took a strong character to hold these people together. And you know, we talk about this golden era, and I kind of came into that, but it was. From what I can remember, sometimes it seemed a little bit chaotic. It seemed you had these big personalities there, all of them, you know, like you know Pat Mackay, 2 times world champion, 3, 4 times Jeff Thompson. Yeah, they were just really giants of the game, and then we come in, you know, we're not 6'4", you know, we're kind of 5'10", you know, 5'11", some of us 6 foot, but we just followed suit. And but we're young and cocky, dare I say. So Tiki Donovan has got these game changers, 3 or 4 of these massive game changers at the top. And then you've got these young, overconfident, you know, younger athletes, you know, who want to take on the world. And then you've got to try to manage these guys together who, when it comes to competition and it comes to the actual event, that are highly focused, sometimes highly volatile, and he had to manage and make that team perform as one.
That would have been
So
so hard. Yeah, I think you've really just painted a picture of
Yeah.
what it was like back then, and it's so interesting that the movement that we see now was sort of born out of getting out of the way of a lot of these techniques.
Crazy.
I think I want to ask you a question because this is. I feel like it comes up on social media so much from people outside of our sport. They say our sport looks like a glorified game of tag.
Yeah.
It's a very common sort of perspective of looking at our sport now. Obviously, back then we were seeing these half-inch gloves and it looked really tough. And you were saying that a lot of this competition was born out of fear and this sort of stuff. How do you see the difference between where we're at now with karate and what it was like in the 90s when it comes to, I guess, how realistic karate was by and being demonstrated in the sport that we play?
well, I've always found this, you know, the irony in that, because in the 80s they used to call us tip tap, you know. In the 90s they called us soft. Yeah, but now we look back and say, oh, the 90s, you know, you was hard. And I'm thinking, well, they used to call us soft then. And I just think that martial arts and karate and whatever the sport looks like now, it definitely has its advantages, its key points where people can excel, and you know, is it the hardest? Well, actually, the premise of karate and sport karate is be first and hit without being hit. And you know, I used to do a lot of security back in the day, you know, and you know, there's some of them would be Thai boxers and all this lot, and they say, oh yeah, you do that touch, you know, but you know, very quickly would gain their respect, you know, when they see it in action. And I just said, well, be first. It teaches me to be first, and it teaches me not to be hit, and actually to hit effectively, you know. And this is maybe part of the transition of the game, where people might say this side is now it's softer, but I don't believe the people that participate are soft at all. You know, some of these guys are seriously hard, as you can probably testify.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
That's this guy. This
Yeah.
guy's hard.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've copped a few hard hits before in the last couple of years. Yeah, no, it's tough.
exactly. So be first, hit without being hit. For me, that's a great rule for the street as well. If you want to say who's tough, you know, you can't afford to take one to give one. That might just be your last one. Um, you can always pick an art and say, oh, well, these are the gaps in that, you know, and everybody always classes it, you know, for the street and how hard you are. But, you know, okay, you know, I love BJJ and I did it for a little while, but somebody will say, oh, yeah, but you can't go on the ground if there's 10 people and they're stamping on your head. But it's still a fantastic martial art. Judo, fantastic. Thai boxing, fantastic. You know, kung fu is fantastic. But everywhere has a gap where you can do it. And this is what maybe MMA has filled that gap to say, right, we're literally bringing all that together. We're stripping off most of the rules and we're going to make this the hardest arena.
Yeah, you can tell me
And it is.
GSP hits soft.
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
yeah, true.
Yeah, Wonder Boy hits
Yeah.
Yeah,
soft.
but
Yeah, no, he doesn't.
even the UFC have rules, right? You still can't gouge the eyes.
Yeah.
You know, you still can't kick somebody in the nuts. You know, because then you're going to get some street fighter to go, yeah, well, I'll just kick him down there, and I'll just do that.
Well,
Well,
our
good
sport
luck
is an
with that.
intense game, and that's like every other martial art that has been modernized and created the sport as well. I want to go through with you, Willie, the sort of landscape of competition as well, really quickly, because now we seem to have an amazing structure of world championships, continental championships, Premier League, Series A, youth leagues. It seems to be a very well-known structure of competitions now. But back in when you were competing, what was it like competing for England, and what was the main sort of competitions that you would go for? Obviously, world championships, but it wasn't obviously like how it is today with the Premier League structure, was it?
Mm. Exactly, and is you know it's good that you know you hit on that because the that reflects on the level of participation, right? So participation has gone up, and also the the early specialization. So when I was around, you know, like most of us, Wayne started. I think Wayne Otto started at 13. I think I was 14. A lot of people didn't start until maybe didn't start until early teens. You know, and then the junior category was actually what we call U21 now,
Oh, right. Yeah,
and
yeah, because
it,
you were senior when you
yeah.
started, when you got
True.
16 years
Well,
old.
on the open circuit, you're senior at 16. But when you go for continental championships, it was junior. The junior European championships would be 18 to 20. That's it. That's the junior. And again, we look at the women in karate. The women was new. So in the Europeans, when I started, the women would go to the male U21, the under 21
That
championships.
was
It
crazy. Let's
wasn't
just
in
yeah,
the seniors.
let's touch on that. There was no female team kumite at the World Championships in a period of the WKF's history. So, WUKO was the first iteration of the WKF. It was the World Union of Karate Do
Wow,
Organizations.
good job on that one.
And then it transitioned in the WKF, but there was a time in this period where there was no female team kumite.
That's crazy.
Yeah, 1992, I think, was the first one. Britain won this one, which was led by Captain Molly Samuels. She was 7 times world champion, I think she was, um, in World Cups, World Games, etc. But yeah, this was the first time. So the participation level has grown. So women's karate, I got to witness the growth of women's karate as well, from being in the junior Europeans to actually fighting alongside the men. And then they used to do 2 minutes, right?
Yes.
Women's karate used to be 2 minutes, and then it switched to 3 minutes. So it's literally level pegging.
You mentioned that the participation is a big factor of as why the
Yeah,
sport has grown so successful now. I'm interested to see, obviously you're a kumite coach, but we're karateka,
yeah.
and we're sort of whole karateka, and kata is a part of us always, whether we like it or not, Willie. I want to get your perspective on kata as well, over the years throughout your competitive journey, but also as a coach now as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm privileged enough to have seen Sensei Sakimoto win his world champion in Sydney, 1986, and I think that was the one of his world titles. So he's probably one of the most famous early examples, and a real traditionalist from Okinawa. You don't get more traditional than that. And so I was privileged to see him compete. And I was also privileged to see Milan from France in 1994, I think, when he was the first non Japanese to win a world kata champion. So, I saw that dominance, from Japan finally broken by the French athlete who's, he's no longer with us now, Milan. But he was a fantastic athlete. And I think there was a transition at that moment from the tradition uh, through Sakimoto and beyond. And then Michael Milan came, and he managed to break that deadlock. And actually, I am an athlete. And he was training with all the modern science at that moment, and he was the first person to break that. So this was a really strong benchmark for kata, was him winning the world title.
For sure. And then obviously the Japanese regained control for a number of years.
Yeah.
But yeah, somebody I'd always go to is like Luca Valdesi in that sort of
Yes,
2008, 2010 sort of era. He was definitely on top of the world at that time. But then it goes back to Japan, and now
Diaz as well.
we've got
Diaz.
Kekeru Nishiyama at the top. So how would you compare these athletes over the year? If you take like Kekeru Nishiyama now and you go all the way back to Sakimoto
Yeah.
back in the 90s and then Luca Valdesi in the middle and all these athletes, how have they differed over the decades?
That's an interesting journey of evolution. And I think it's also sometimes a little bit important to know that in Kumite, we get 10 world champions every 2 years, male and female. In kata, they get like two. So there's far less champions, kata champions, than there are Kumite champions on record. So they really are part of an elite club. I don't think Japan ever lost it. They were always sitting at the vanguard of karate, kata, and we owe them everything for bringing the world karate. But it's an interesting journey. Like I said, it was Milan that showed the world that an athlete someone who can now bring another perspective, who can respect the tradition, but combine it with the progression of the modern science to bring it all into one to give us the performances that he gave us. And I think that in those early days, and again, I don't want anybody to kind of be jumping on me for my opinion about what I think what it was then and what I think it is now. But I think that the intent and in the delivery was I feel was is different to now. So now it's really performance orientated, and these athletes are going out there with a high level of athleticism, and there's this kind of I think I see like a struggle between now the athlete and the traditionalists, are locking horns in how they execute a kata. So I'm not, the expert in kata. So I go on how a kata makes me feel. I'm not the expert on technique for kata, but I can certainly understand how it makes me feel. When are they taking me on a journey? Do I believe their kata, or is this just a performance? Do I believe the expression on your face, the anger when I look at your eyes and that intensity? Do I believe that that is real, or is that just a performance? Sometimes you can tell whether when you look inside somebody's eyes performing kata, and it makes you go, oh wow, it's hard to hold that gaze because they're just right through you, or if someone doesn't have that intent. So for me, it's both sides, and I think both sides are very much present. I think that social media and YouTube has a lot to answer for in terms for the performance side of things, because you can only really capture the performance. So a lot of the young athletes will use this as a resource to learn, but you unless you're communicating with these guys, you're not really going to be taught how to feel. So they would need guidance in that area.
And you must
So
be so like connected with one of the most consistent athletes right now, and you get to eyewitness that in Grace Lau. And I think that must be so lucky. I know you obviously don't train her personally, but you're
mm,
obviously in and amongst it and witnessing that sort of training with her. So she is clearly doing both, integrating the traditional performance of a demonstration
absolutely,
of a kata,
you
and
know,
then
she's it's no accident. She's world champion, world number one, and she's one of the hardest working athletes, whether it's kata or kumite. That I've seen. Period. Not just here, but just generally. She's a very hard working and committed athlete into what she's doing. So yeah, it's I've been uh, overseeing that journey for 9 years,
wow.
really, and just ensuring that she'll get what she wants when she needs, not wants, but when she needs something. It's like, okay, where and it's really about the training environment and making sure that she's in the right place with the right people, learning the right things and training with purpose, and
Yeah, and
that's what she does
there's not
very
many
well.
more intense kata
Yeah.
athletes than Grace as well. That stare when she's on the
Exactly.
tatami. I think what you said about an athlete communicating with the audience or whoever's judging them is such a valuable piece of information, and that sort of used to be very present, back in the day. Now it's a little bit more performative, a lot more athleticism involved.
Yep.
Jumps are getting a lot higher and less for the traditional meaning of the card. I think that's so
Mm.
valuable. But I think let's move on to some kumite, hey?
Absolutely. Well, this is definitely your number one
Yes, back to
field
Kumite now.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. We've always got to talk about Carter, but we want to talk about your field of
yeah.
expertise, and this is where you have the most knowledge. And I want to get your perspective on how you think the sport has changed. And you mentioned something that I picked up on before. It's it's the way that you train. When you spoke about Milan, and how the application of different training methods, and it wasn't just about doing the kata uh, traditionally, but it was about how can you be a better athlete. Do you obviously think that is true for kumite as well, and the way things have trained, maybe the Olympic pressure, becoming an Olympic sport, all of these different ways that have changed our sport to become what it is today?
I think that the 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 nineties, end of the eighties, nineties was the birth of when karateka started training more like athletes, started to look into other sports. And it was about the availability of the technology that was available to us then. So we used to lift, we used to go sprinting, but we would actually seek out maybe a sprint club and just join one of their sessions, go lifting and get some instruction from a lifting coach, plyometrics, all the different physical areas of development that we could actually do from the generic training we would actually be doing. But as technology gets better and as it becomes more commonplace and a necessity to become an athlete, I think it's one of the most important things now in a young athlete is the physical side of thing and the fundamentals.
And yeah, I think the way the athletes have evolved just like physically has also reflected in the tactics used in kumite and how different the kumite actually looks. So could you tell us like how and why a lot of the distance, the contact, the explosiveness, the ring craft is a huge thing that has changed over the years. What's the biggest change between old school and new school karate?
uh, Definitely the biggest change is the contact, you know. But I think behind that, the rule change would be uh, like the intent. So in the old, in the eighties, for example, you would get ippon, you would get a rosari like 1 point for a normal strike. But if you manage to win somebody, or your Jodan punch is so emphatic that it knocks somebody off their feet, then you would get ippon.
Would
So
you win?
Super point.
Do you
Super
win
point.
off Ippon?
no, no, no.
No, no, it's
It
still
was
just three
first to
points.
six.
First
It
to
was first to
six.
six. So you would get 2 points if you winded someone. But if you just scored a Gakazuki or Gizambazuki, then you would just get 1 point. But if you win them, bend them over, then you would get 2 points.
So
Right.
So
cool.
the
Yeah,
so
that's
the
so different.
intention. So we used to train for that. We used to train to double somebody over,
Is that like training to specifically hit the solar
hit
plexus
as
or
hard
something
as you
like, or
can,
or maybe it's
hit
a
as
sort
hard
of
as you
stick
can.
a knuckle out in your glove?
Well, we'd have something where we would train down the tube, so accuracy on the solar plexus would be paramount. So, we would practice to really hit that target as hard as we can with great timing midway through their Mayageri with 1 foot in the air, and we would just level them off, and then that would be like, oh, and we would be training for that. And when we see the soul drift out of their eyes, then we know you got somebody. So we used to train to dominate and overwhelm people
Wow.
in that way.
And
So
then you
so
had
so
MMA and the UFC sort of come into the space, and then you were like, all right, well, we don't need to do that anymore because UFC is doing it. And I think it
yeah,
would have been the
yeah, the rules
Olympic pressure,
changed.
the pressure to get into the Olympics, and the fact that we're a martial art at our core, but we practice our martial art in a sport capacity, and we want to make that spectator friendly and all of this sort of stuff. That's when you start taking away some of the intention to knock the other person out or the intention to win them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that was when there was only sort of like 16 and over on the open circuit. You're a senior. But now, Youth leagues have got under 14s, 12 and 13-year-olds, cadet, junior. So it has to be user friendly. It has to be enjoyable. You cannot have 13-year-olds like sparking each other out. That's not really the game.
So do you
So
think it was
so
sorry to cut you off there, but do you think the
yeah, yeah.
reason for the change in the eras was purely because of the rule changes in the sport itself and the accommodation of the younger age categories? Because let's say if we had stayed, 18 plus and it was just for, staying in the world championships, or do you think that if we had have stayed the course, we would have been the same? Or because of all these changes, now we have adapted this sport-like mentality a part of our game?
I think the mentality has changed with the rules and with society, and with the change in the nature of the game, and it had to evolve. It's part of evolution. I can't think of anything worse than going back to how it was in 1980. No, parquet flooring, uh, these little pads. It's okay for the dojo. I get that, but not a sport that we're going to encourage. I just think, but it's evidence enough that the level of participation for WKF karate or karate, generally, is high, and it's because of this high degree of control and skill that is needed to execute the sport. The skill level of the guys now is off the chart. Of our athletes now, it's literally off the chart. More the range of techniques that the athletes are using now compared to what it was in the 80s, in the 90s, and even now the early 2000s. It's just moving on. These guys are absolutely fantastic now.
That's awesome. Over the years, if you could bring back, you've sort of said how the old school karate did have a lot of its faults in the way of contact and all of this sort of stuff. We like tatamis. We like competing on tatamis instead of hardwood floor. But if you were to bring a rule back to new school karate over the years, what would that rule be? That's a hard one,
It
isn't
is
it?
tough.
That's a tough one. It's because
Yeah.
If
What
not
there's
is
it,
been
it? What
so
is
yeah, there's been
it?
so many good rules over the years, but also everything has its
Oh,
like for and against.
I know.
Oh, you've got one.
Yeah, I've got one. Uh, 2 points for an undefended technique.
oh, undefended.
Undefended technique. I don't think I know
You
this
know
rule
when you used
anyway.
to, somebody kicks and you spin them and you hit them in the back.
In the back,
Hit them in the
two
back.
points. I do remember
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Yes, an undefended technique. If there is literally no defense, where you've got them into a position where you can score with an undefended technique,
Oh,
2 points. This would solve the Zanchin issue that they've brought in to the rules now, where they're trying to say if anybody's running away after a point, this is Paul Zanchin, or they're turning away and celebrating too early. Um, this would solve that because because it's a consequence. If they turn away and celebrate, like score and turn away, okay, don't give them the point. But also, somebody else can hit you and they can score 2 points for an undefended technique. I
ooh,
think that would solve the Zanchin issue pretty quickly. And that's the one thing that I would actually say is the Zanchin now has become lower in the order of
mm,
scoring points
yeah.
than it used to be. Because again, then you had to have Sanchin because the other person is not only going to maybe finish their technique, but it's coming through you. So you really need to keep your wits about you after you score. So it's really important to have Zanchin then.
Do you
Oh,
have
But
one,
I
Mitch?
think now
Do you have a rule
I
that you
would
would
bring
bring
that
back?
back.
very good. Maybe we should write a note to the WKF for our proposal. My rule, I think, I kind of love the golden point. Do you
To,
remember the golden
as in
point?
like extra time golden point?
Yeah. I think like if it's like like a 0-0,
Yeah.
right, or it goes to decision, just like 30 seconds. Golden Point. I just think that would just create so much spectacle
I
for fans.
I do
Into the
love that.
sport.
Yeah, I think the ending in a draw and then going to judge's decision. There's just so much that goes into judge's decision.
Yeah.
It'd be so much easier if we just decided it with a single point. You want to know mine?
What's yours?
Mine's I alluded to it before. Two-handed grabbing. But on the opposite side, I want to bring it back, but it's more two-handed throws
Okay.
because one-handed throws are elite. They can be really good, but we're missing the hip throws. We're missing so many throws we used to do.
True.
But I hate the congestion that like two hands and for pretty much an unlimited time like it was in 2010. I did not like that
Yeah.
that style of karate and what that looked like. But the hip throws, and do you remember them?
Oh,
How
dude,
good they
absolutely.
were?
Yeah, I
I
love
want to, yeah, I'd love to see them come back. I think as it stands, all the rule changes that have happened over the years, it's resulted in a better sport overall. And I honestly, I hand up can say I think our sport looks the best that it has ever looked. What are some of the rule changes that you feel have contributed most to the advancement of our sport over the years, Willie?
I think 3 points for a head kick, definitely,
It
and
didn't
for a
used to be.
takedown.
What was the what was the
No, it was just 1 and 2 points. So an ippon would actually have been what we now call a rosari.
Right. Yeah. Oh, well, that's a
Yeah,
huge change.
Oh my
Yep. That's a
goodness.
great one.
yeah. So that one encouraged the kicks. So that would coincide with the increase in the volume of Jodan kicks that we have in the game now, because it's a 3 pointer. Never used to be,
When did you see
and the
that the
same
kicks
for
come into
takedowns as
action?
well.
When did you sort of see the kicks come into play? Because obviously, Ivan Liao was known for some of the most amazing kicks. But when did you sort of see it take off in the whole world of karate?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, there's always been great kickers through time, over time, but when it really kind of took root, I think was really we going. I would say the 2000s and tens onwards. Gurunev was a great kicker, you know. But yeah, then everybody started doing it, and I think it coincides with the explosion of social media and YouTube, and I think it's hard to talk about the progression and not actually talk about the influence of social media and how that has changed the game. Whereas there was a time when only those at the World Championships would witness pretty much what's going on. Or if you've got one of those camcorders, those big ones,
I would not like
the
to
good
be a
old
part
days.
of the official
Yeah.
media team back in
You've just got
1990.
you've just got your pocket camcorder, you
Yeah.
know.
You mentioned, Willie, that today we have our athletes competing in the sport, and they are one of the most elite athletes by nature, and the techniques that they can do are some of the most amazing things. How do you think these athletes now are coached differently to back then? Because I loved what you talked about, saying that you were training to really hit someone and to win them. What do you think is different about the way athletes were coached back then when you were competing and to these superhuman athletes now?
Uh, well, I don't think that the coaching now, that I don't think there's going to be an emphasis, hitting people with the intention to to win them, to actually, you know, stop them. Uh, and a friend of mine used to say, "Menace without malice."
Oh wow.
We can go out and have menace, but not malice. We're still within the boundaries of the sport and respect. But we would have menace. We would go out there with intention to do that. I don't think that is coached so much now. The coaches now are more versed in general fitness, so you can see a lot of training now is mixed with agility and general fundamental movement drills, and then they combine it very well with the skill. So a lot of coaches now are increasing their knowledge in other areas. I do feel that there's a danger in copying. Um, I do feel there's a danger in copying just from the internet and copying drills, because you don't know the context sometimes, and you don't know whether this is a pre-competition drill or something that is done in a particular period of training. You won't know the volume, and the repetitions of that particular drill, and how often and how much loading is involved in it. So the danger of just copying blindly is there, but I do feel that the coaching now is heavily influenced, and in a good way, by general functional movements, because sometimes too much skill training can undermine functional development, which we see in some young athletes. Functionally, they are not strong at all.
What's next
You
in
know,
terms of we're now in 2026? What do you think karate is going to look like, or kumite specifically? What do you think that's going to look like in, say, 2030 or 2035? What's going to be different about kumite in the next 10 years?
or I think that depends a lot on the rules, and I think that we're probably getting to that point where we're nearly kind of at the best where we're going to be, and I say that like the the marathon, just under the 2 hours. There's not much faster a human can do it that we can foresee now. 100 meters, when's that record going to get broken? Are we seeing now the fastest men physically possible naturally? And I think that we're not far away from that with karate now.
That's a
The
really cool
rules have a,
realization.
a
Yeah.
lot to display, but I don't think we're far away, because everybody now is doing everything.
Mm.
I think the major changes are going to come from rule changes. But as far as if we strip all that away and we just look at some of these great players and what they're doing, you know, I just pull one out of the hat. Zaretska, she's kind of doing spinning kick off the line without putting her foot down, coming back with a double my wash and switching that to an uro, and then hitting the person. Right? Where are you going? Where are you going with that?
Yeah.
I mean,
how much
How can we get
how
those
much
better?
better does it get?
But
Yeah.
in terms
you
of
know,
like, I think what is the art of the position that you're in as well is you're trying to find the next thing that is coachable, and the trend of the sport and how tactics have changed. Because, we looked at the highlights from Agaev and Bussa, and he
mm,
really changed the tactical side of it, where now it's almost going back to how it used to be back in the day, where it's very much standoffish. The Abdulaziz type
mm.
vibe, where it's just I'm facing you, and you, whoever pulls the trigger first will make the mistake, but I'll capitalize. So I guess you obviously can't spill your secrets, but
Yeah.
I'd love to know what you
Well,
think would.
I think we're all on the same page,
Yeah.
because everybody's working out the same things in different places, and we've had these tacticians, and in the past, like I mentioned, I know the name now. It's Halden Alagash,
Oh,
and he was one of the first fantastic, kickers and movers. He really changed the game. There's not many people that change the game. Agayev, you talk about, he's a game changer, and I think that when you have a game changer, they're a step up from the playmaker. I have this little category of athlete, and the game changer is the top. You have the playmaker, which is kind of they've got all the gear, they've got all the moves and stuff, but they're not really changing the game, And then you've got like a number three is what I call a caretaker mentality, which is like somebody that turns up 9, leaves at 5, does what's expected, but you're not going to get any more. Reliable, but not exceptional. So we go back to Gaev. This guy's is a game changer. You look at some of his. I read between the lines, and if you just look at him under pressure, maybe people can go back to this, and he's in the corner, and he's just upper body, bam, 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 bam. Yeah. Now, it's not just demonstrating how important it is to use the upper body, in this way. You then got to look at the focus. Then you got to look at the decision making that he's doing, and then you have to look at his composure under stress, and then you have to look at his solid base and his stance and how he is adjusting to do that as well. And then once you've got somebody that can actually do that without a partner to that level, then catching balls, you know noodles, then you have to put Luigi Busa in front of them, who is the Olympic champion, and then say, "Now do it."
Yeah. Absolute game changer. I
Oh,
don't think there's any argument there. I mean, Aga have completely transformed our sport, and the changes that you've seen over the years, and what's continuously pushing for change now in 2026. How do you stay ahead of it as a coach, as a head national coach? How do you stay ahead of the game now in 2026?
well, it's really about now getting that fine balance between technology, coaching knowledge, using methods to understand your athletes and athlete needs, and AI is becoming a real big thing at the moment. But more importantly, how we use you know AI. And I'm working at the Hong Kong Sports Institute, who work very closely with the universities in Hong Kong on different projects. One of the projects is using AI to kind of substitute advanced biomechanics. So normally, when people talk of biomechanics, you have all these dots, and all over, and it's quite a time-consuming process for the data that you actually get back. And then you kind of then say to the coach, right, okay, here's the data. What do you make of that? And it's like, well, I need to go and study biomechanics first
Yeah, I don't,
before
I
I
don't,
actually
I don't
understand
speak
what.
scientist. I'm sorry, I can't read this.
Exactly, exactly. So it's kind of harnessing that need and that technology and translating that into coaching language, like, okay, this one, that knee, this, that position, that fast, this, okay, here's the problem, done. And they can actually interpret that. Uh, and we're kind of working on a project at the moment that we use this kind of technology in our dojo, that if we need, we can actually film somebody and get that data in a coach friendly way. So it's not new data. You can get that data, but we can actually get that data within 10 minutes. But if somebody was to do it the traditional biomechanics way, they're going to have to block out all afternoon. So this is just uh, one area where we try and get those marginal gains. If we can improve the quality of the coaching, then the athlete then um, can actually then receive that information more efficiently.
That's
Wow,
So
huge.
that's
Like,
massive.
yeah,
imagine if you could say, like, how fast my punch is,
Yeah.
and that could be tracked at a Premier League. So
Yeah.
like you compete in a Premier League, and you
Yeah.
can say the average speed of your techniques was so and so kilometers per hour or miles per hour. If you're from
Mine's
yeah,
200 kilometers per hour. Just letting you know. Just letting you know that's just my unofficial data
unofficial,
analysis.
yeah, keyword unofficial.
And mine's 12.
But imagine having
Now,
that data and
Yeah.
having that knowledge, and then being able to coach in different ways to
Yeah.
improve those sort of small statistics. What's the most promising sort of statistic or thing that you've found out with implementing today's technology into coaching and into karate?
well, a simple one for us would be, for example, team kata. When you've got the three figures, and we can tell uh, who's moving first. We can
True.
we can
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
look at each angle. At any fixed moment to say, well, we can actually use that to hone synchronicity and accuracy. So that's one key way that can be used effectively and quite quickly. And we can communicate that to the athlete, because the athlete normally would say, "Oh no, I think it's okay." Well, not really.
Imagine if
You two are
judges
okay,
started
but you're
using that.
moving a bit quicker.
Yeah, imagine if judges or referees started using that. Now, say world championships, and you've got a team Carter in front of you, and then a big score pops up on the screen and said 97% synchronicity or something like that.
That's crazy. That just takes so much out of the
Yeah,
referees.
It
But
does.
yeah, oh
yeah,
my gosh.
yeah. It's
Makes it more
possible. Maybe that's the
objective.
way. Maybe that's the way things are going in terms
Yeah.
of judging, because I think one of the areas of controversy, in our sport, is the subjectivity
Mhm.
of the judging in kata. And it's always red or blue. You know, and I normally get the wrong one. But it's subjective, and for as long as you have the unguided subjectivity, then you're always going to have controversy. But we love controversy anyway. We love controversy.
Well, we just can't escape
Look
it
at
right
football.
now.
Look
It's
at
No,
just
we
football
love it.
now.
it's inevitable.
We don't even get to argue over the offside anymore, do we?
No, we don't.
I'm
Yeah,
No.
watching
true.
the world.
I think there's definitely
What
elements of
happened
our
to that?
sport that like we need to keep. With a lot of other sports, like you're talking about football and basketball, and sometimes it just rules out that the grey area.
Yeah.
I think sometimes when you're watching a sport, the grey area creates a lot of back and forth conversation and controversy. And yeah, I know it does suck sometimes to have a match rely on moments like that. But like you say, we love debating whether it was red or blue or
Yeah,
whether
we
that
love
punch was
it.
in
We
or
do
not.
love it.
And it is some entertainment. Like I can imagine just following on from the 97% synchronicity. If you had that for just individual kata and you had those statistics of on average, their techniques were a 9 out of 10 score, for example. And then their stances were a 9 out of 10 consistency. And you could analyze that through AI, and then it just popped up and judges could use that.
Yeah.
But then you don't get what you were talking about, William, earlier in the podcast, of that like communication with the audience that the athlete has, and you can't measure that intensity and the personal
Mm,
sort of that sort of intensity that the
yeah,
athlete conveys.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's really, really important in terms of the with the kata. Like I say, we can't measure the feeling, how it makes you feel.
Far out. I reckon we could spend so much time talking about all the technological advancements, and we've covered the physical side of things as well, of how much the sport's changed, the technology side of things as well, and something that we spoke about off air as just before really was the psychological side of it. I'd like to get your perspective on the psychological and mental side of competition back in the 80s and 90s, and then to today's karate as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that things are a little bit more complex now than they were back in the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, and that's the introduction of social media has changed how people think. So, in the 80s, 90s, we were just focused on skill mastery, um, fighting to your best, and we could just focus on every single point that we went there to go and train on. Whereas nowadays, from mid early 2000s and onwards, maybe 2010 onwards, um, this introduction of the social media now gives another layer of pressure, because they are constantly sort of like, they grew up online. Number one, they understand branding a lot more than I ever do. If I need branding advice, I'll go to my kids. They would be advising me. You know, they view competition now as content creation. Yeah, which again, something that new coaches now, we have to understand of this dynamic. We have to involve with that. When I first saw people filming themselves in the warm-up area, now before in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, you go in the warm-up area, you wouldn't have a phone or camera. You're kind of preparing for war. You're preparing to go and do what you've got to do on the tatami, and this is where your focus is. You're on your teammates or yourself. But now, they'll set the camera up, or someone's going to be filming, and their warm up and their preparation is content.
I hate it.
And I'm
I
not.
hate it.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I hate that the world's turning this way, but I'd so agree.
Absolutely, and it comes from this. They understand branding. I'm not saying that it's a negative thing or positive things. Actually, they can manage it, and some people can manage it. But what I feel happens, the difference in the psychology now, is that now it's contributing more to mental health, because then you are constantly being watched. So
Mhm.
you're constantly being watched. You're consistently being judged as well. So that has to do something to an individual. Constantly watched, constantly judged, and then when you don't meet that expectation, you settle for celebrating mediocrity. When you lose, it's not because you've you know messed up. You had a really bad performance, and really terrible. It's next time. They give some quote. Next time it's a fantastic performance. You don't lose, you learn. I love that one. I use that sometimes. you know, but
That,
all the motivational junk food, it lasts about as long as about as nutritious as a McDonald's. It tastes good, but it's not lasting. You know, so I call that the motivational junk food, but it has its place. But I just think it gives rise to celebrating mediocrity, and some coaches kind of buy into that, where they say, fantastic, it's great. I mean, you just got to be 8-0, 8-0. Actually, I've got the video, you got spanked. you know,
Yeah, I
you
get
know?
what you mean. I see some athletes, they'll post on like they're a single ippon,
yeah.
but they lost the match. But
yeah,
they will post the ippon. But I guess
yeah, they'll post it.
this media attention, I suppose that's what comes with being a professional athlete, and
Mm.
that's what we're seeing more and
But
more
I,
of. It's
I,
like,
I would see more value in the authenticity,
Of
to say,
course.
you know what, I really got hammered actually, and my mind wasn't in the right place, but I'm going to go back to the drawing board, and I'm actually going to pick apart what
Mhm.
happened, and then I'm going to make it better for the next one. That I can handle,
Absolutely, but
you
I
know.
think people
So
can see through that. I think there are people that do the what did you call it? The junk food, the motivational
the
junk food.
motivational junk
Yeah,
food,
but then
yeah.
I also think there's like so much space for people to be real and to be saying, you know what, I did fight like really really badly, and
Mm.
I did get beaten, and you know what, I'm gonna come back and try work on this because it wasn't good enough. I think there is so much room for that honesty and people for young people to relate to that. Otherwise, you're right. You celebrate mediocrity, and that's not just I think in a general sense in terms of social media and sport, I think that can
Mm.
be common in this generation.
Yeah, that's not what we want. We do want it to promote our sport. We want media to promote our sport
Yep.
in a good way.
Yeah.
And that's why I said
Yeah.
about the professional athletes. You see footballers, they get all the media attention in the world,
Yeah.
and they have to deal with that.
Of course.
And that's sort of where
Yeah,
we're
it's not
heading.
easy.
Yeah, that's where we're heading. We've got some of these athletes that have massive social media followings,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of spectators that watch them at every tournament, and that's the fame that's coming with a lot
Yep.
of our athletes, and that's cool to see.
Yeah.
So cool.
And it's pressure. I think it's fantastic that we're getting those kind of views and we're getting that attention as a platform. And also, I mean, there are some athletes that handle it very well, and that do promote the sport very well, and they have got 100,000 followers, and they're very good at it. But I think that for every one that is like that, I think there is 10 that are not so skilled at balancing the social media, and they can have mental health issues
Mhm.
where they really not live up to the expectation that they've actually set themselves up to be.
Wow. I think that in itself is like a full-on podcast episode that we
Yep.
could dive in for another day. But that is really fantastic insight there. Thanks, Willie. But is there something else that we haven't touched on today's episode? Because I just want to get as
Yeah,
much as I can out of you.
lastly for me, yeah, I think the key is coach education. And this is one area that I really uh, try to push with my coaches, here in the Hong Kong Sports Institute. And we will have coach education sessions, and it could be on something as simple as giving feedback. What are the different modes of giving feedback, and how do we give the best feedback, when to give the right feedback. So we can do coach education sessions. We can have informal, and I promote formal coach education as well. So this is an area that maybe in my next life, I'd like to sit back and do, is really bring this coach education to not just karate, but generally for martial arts practitioners. But primarily, I'm a karate guy, and I'm a WKF coach,
So
and that's probably where I'd start.
Just for if there's any coaches listening to this podcast at the moment, William, do you have any advice of like staying up to date and being a good coach for the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think that it just starts with, what is your philosophy? What do you believe? What are the values that underpins your coaching? And write them down. It could be, okay, discipline, commitment. It could be, I value athlete autonomy. It could be, um, I want everybody to have respect, and these are some common values in sport. But, write down the values, the attitudes, beliefs, and the philosophies that you go by for your coaching, and then list them down. And then every day in your coaching, execute your philosophy.
I love that. I'll,
wow.
I'll be doing that
You
for
write 'em
sure.
down,
Yeah,
write 'em down.
that's great preparation for nationals. Thank you, William. What's your coaching philosophy as it stands today?
You're going to have to read my book for that one,
I love that. That's great. When
So,
it comes out for
which
the
is not
coach
written yet,
education.
but it's not far off yours, but it does come around. It's underpinned by a set of values, really.
Fantastic.
Honesty, integrity, and we build from there. But I do have one, but you're gonna have to wait
All
for that
right.
one.
Well, you got to make sure we get the sales, the first release sales on those books, Willie. Lastly, before we let you go, because this has been an absolute amazing episode, and we could be chatting all day about everything under the sun within karate. But we talked about your future with Hong Kong, and I just want to know what your legacy would like to be. You've done pretty much everything there is to achieve in karate. You've won the world championships. You've competed at high level teams. You've coached your son to a world championship gold medal. You've coached a successful national team to many championships and so many accolades. But when it's all said and done, what's the lasting legacy you want to have on the world of karate?
Continuous development, which is Kaizen, right?
Wow.
And I'd like to feel that everybody that I've impacted on, whether I'm here and I've got a set of coaches, that they continue to grow and become better and better, keep learning, keep developing, and build on what I've left.
That is just fantastic. Well, I've got goosebumps talking to you today, Willie, and I just can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to chat to us
My
and
pleasure.
impart your knowledge.
My pleasure.
I would love to have you on again and to talk about so many other things in the world of karate. But yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, and I know Nathan's loved it as well.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Willie. Yeah, I think the value of this podcast episode is going to be felt by every single listener. I think everyone can take something out of this. And I think topics-wise, there's like 10 different things that we could just do for a topic-focused episode. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, Willie, to come
No worries.
Wow, that was a lot to digest in that episode.
What are we up to?
I think it's like 4 hours. I think we could have kept going though.
We could have, 100%.
It hurt my heart to try and cut things off at certain points, but far out. He's so knowledgeable.
He just loves talking about karate, which is why he's been so valuable as a guest. And to talk about the topic that we've discussed today, he's been the perfect guest. And honestly, like, if you enjoy these topic-focused episodes where we sort of pick a theme for the podcast, we bring on a special guest like we did today with Willie Thomas, leave a comment below and say, I really like this, and suggest a topic that you would like us to talk about. We're more than open to hearing what you guys want.
Well, this is really the essence why we love talking into this microphone, is because we just love talking about karate and with people who have lived experience. I think that was the best thing that he said from the top. Like, he doesn't consider himself an expert, which is crazy.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. But I think it's true. Like, it's not that you're an expert, but I think that's what makes you an expert.
Yes.
Is that you've lived so many different experiences, and he's walked so many different walks of life within karate. So there are so many things that we can talk about with Willie again, and with some other superstar expert guests. So yeah, let us know. There's so much still to go for the rest of 2026 season. We're looking towards November for the Karate World Cup in Hangzhou. So we'll be covering the last few teams that are still yet to qualify. I think there's one more to go in Africa.
Yep.
But that is one of the biggest events for the end of the year, and there's so much to go on. But make sure you comment down below who you wanted us to interview next, the different topics, and most importantly, the country that you are watching to from, because we're covering all the languages. I don't think I'm going to be trying Hong Kong Cantonese anytime soon.
You did it once. That's all you need to do it
That's
for.
it.
Yeah.
Make sure you are on the WKF YouTube channel as a karate fan, the WKF subscription. You get early access to new videos and different content that only exclusive to the members. You can watch content ad-free and have special mentions just for yourself. So it's the way you can reflect on all the Premier League matches as well from the finals. So make sure you're on the subscription for Karate Fan. Thank you for tuning into the World Karate Cast on the YouTube channel. Please like, share, and most importantly, comment. Thank you, Nathan. It's been a fantastic episode.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mitchell. We'll see you for the next one.